Thank you very much. Erev Tov. So, how do we tell the story of what occurred in Israel 2014, this past summer? How do we deal with the so-called matzav? How do we deal with the so-called conflict? I want to share with you one vignette. A camp in the Boston area, Friday morning, July the 25th. The staff, made up of both Israelis and North Americans, begin their activity with something like this. About now in Israel is a few hours before Shabbat. Yet, nonetheless, thousands of people are still traveling south to deliver food, clothes, packages to soldiers on the border, some of whom are going into Gaza, some of whom have come out. We too, in preparation for our Shabbat, are going to write letters, we're going to prepare some packages, and they will be sent to Israel next week. There's something beautifully profound, I think, in that example. It has simplicity, but is by no means simplistic. It had the capacity to move the story, the narrative, out of the so-called matzav, out of the so-called conflict, and entrenched the way we spoke about Israel in values that were timeless, but relating to the timely. Those staff people were able to ground their discussions on Israel around Shabbat, around community, around responsibility, around a sense of calling that we need to do something. By the way, the matzav, what on earth is that word? The situation? I think it's a word we choose to describe a condition that we choose not to describe. It's a little bit like our parents or grandparents speaking Yiddish. Did anyone grow up with that? I did. So they would speak Yiddish so that we wouldn't understand what was going on. Friends, this is not good educational practice. We have to empower ourselves and our pupils to be able to clearly name what we're talking about. I want to use one example, a textual example, to play out this idea of moving from timely to timeless a little bit more. I want to take us to the opening Mishnah, the opening tractate of the opening Gemara that deals with and is called brachot, deals with blessings. Some context. The Mishnah was written to the backdrop of the destruction of the Second Temple. It's a time where the Chazal, the rabbis, knew we were moving from priesthood to learning, to prayer, from temple to temple, or from temple to synagogue. They knew that on the eve of this diaspora, the second, but it was going to be longer, the capacity to keep the oral law was slowly going to fade away, was slowly going to become less effective. And the oral law becomes written in a format called the Mishnah. That's the context. Let me get a little bit more dramatic, may I? Picture Fiddler on the Roof, daughter number 2. She's going off to the rebellious guy. She's in the train station. You can hear the whistling of the train coming. The father is there. He has what? 2 minutes to tell her everything she needs to know to sustain and continue being Jewish, what we call today Jewish continuity. What does he say? That, my friends, is the beginning of the Mishnah. I don't want to overplay it. I think I'm underplaying it. Everything we need to know is captured in those few opening bars. And I want to go even further and suggest that the way we open a Mishnah, The opening bars of the Mishnah, a little bit like the opening bars of a symphony, will tell us everything we need to know. It encapsulates it all. Listen carefully. Da-da-da-da. Beethoven's Fifth, the first few bars, everything that follows is a discussion, a commentary, an interpretation, a harmony to those first few bars. Now, let's take a look at the Mishnah again for the first time. The opening question is remarkable, extraordinary. What is on the minds of the rabbis in this time of crisis? The temple has just been destroyed. In the time of, dare I say, matzav? There's a matzav. So what do we ask? Me'ei matai korin et hashema ba'aravit. When do we read the Shema in the evening? That's the question. Have we forgotten? Is the crisis that serious that something so fundamental we've forgotten? The answer is even more puzzling. I'm going to say the answer in Hebrew, then I'm going to say it in English, and I promise you still won't understand. Shall I try Yiddish? Here's the answer. Misha'a shehakohanim nichnesim le'echol b'trumatan ad sof ha'ashmura rishona. From the time the high priests, the Kohanim, would eat their sacrifice until the end of the first watch. You get it? Achshav atem yodim. Now you know when you have to read the Shema. What kind of answer is that? And by the way, later opinions in the Mishnah, as you probably know, will actually give you the precise time. So why not give the time from the outset? I think the rabbis here were doing something beyond our wildest imaginations. They are grounding something they know is going to occur in a memory that needs to be sustained. When you and I say the Shema in the evening and in the morning, we are transported back to those moments of the temple when it stood in all of its glory. That's what the rabbis are doing. They are moving the timely, the time we need to say the Shema, to becoming timeless, to the values and memories that we need to latch on and entrench these concepts of the Shema. I have your attention. So I'm going to try one more. Little interpretation of the Mishnah. This is a little bit more wild, but I want you to, again, look carefully, listen carefully. Da-da-da-da, me'ei matai. Maybe the nigun was doing the rounds before Beethoven. Who knows? But within the word me'ei matai, within the word when, aleph, mem, taf. Do you see it? The truth. If you'll indulge this interpretation, may we suggest that the Mishnah isn't asking a question at all, but is actually making a bold statement. It is saying the following: the truth, the emet, the enduring understanding of saying the Shema is the following. Could you imagine if we create a Daf Talmud, a Talmudic page that relates to Israel education in that manner? It might look or sound something like this. Me'ei matai mitaskim b'Yisrael. When do we engage? When? Not if. When do we engage with Israel? Matai mitaskim b'Yisrael. If you hear the music really well, you may hear beyond mitaskim the word la'asok. La'asok b'divrei Torah, a blessing we make first thing in the morning. To become engaged or engrossed. Engrossed, I think, is so much better. Totally in the milieu of the Torah. That's the bracha, that's the blessing we wish for, that's the blessing we give to others as we deal with Israel education. That must be how we ground the timely into the timeless. I want to take you to another, what I believe is a commanding and romantic image that perhaps the rabbis were so missing when they wrote that first Mishnah of Brachot. The image is that of cheruvim, the cherubs, that were placed on top of a box, an ark, that contained the Luchot HaBrit, the tablets broken, that we received on Sinai. That box, in the glorious days of the temple, sat in the Holy of Holies. But the images are quite remarkable. The images of angelic, childlike faces. The children become angelic because of their faces. They don't need the wings. Nonetheless, we give them wings. Why do we have the audacity and ability and capacity to give them wings? Because we have rooted them in the Torah. We have rooted them in values. We've entrenched them in a capacity to understand the timely through the timeless. That's the gift of the cheruvim. That's the image we need to bear in mind as educators. Have the audacity to give our pupils, our children, our colleagues, the wings to gain that perspective. So evoking that poem of Amnon Shamash, roots and wings, is not so much a dichotomy, but it actually is, as they say in the Talmud, Hainu hach. It's actually the same thing. You will gain that perspective from above because you're rooted below. That Friday morning at camp, just outside Boston, those staff people had the capacity and the ability and the success in providing both roots and wings, in embedding the conversation of Israel around the values and the milieu of the institution they were living in, that speaks of values that resonate, moving the story or the conversation about Israel from being just political to perhaps being prophetic. Did you ever hear what Heschel said and wrote in the late 60s, wandering the streets of Jerusalem after the Six-Day War? He writes that he could hear the voices of the prophets who wandered those same streets. Yafo. Was it called Ben Yehuda then? You know the area. He could hear the prophets because he was tuned into what he himself called the echoes of eternity. Those moments of Friday, a beautiful simplicity but not simplistic, I think provide a model for speaking about Israel that is entrenched, political, prophetic, timely, timeless, roots and wings, providing for compelling and exciting journeys for those that will engage in this phenomenally exciting and compelling chapter in our history called Israel. Toda Rabba. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching Eli Talks. Click through or subscribe to the Eli Talks channel for more inspired Jewish ideas.